Bob Bertran came to this conclusion: help save America. Never, ever vote for lawyers. But go to that. We've got a lot to say. This is Miami, Florida. We did this interview. We're here at the home of Robert Bertran, a Canadian who came to Florida to find profits and freedom, the right to live your life, without being legally abused by a system. He found out back in the 90s that America isn't all as sweet apple pie and motherhood as it appears from the outside. This is Bob Bertran's story of how he got rid of the gag rules. And now it took a busload of Floridians to go up to Tallahassee, the state capital, and change minds about the gag rules that the state bar wanted in place so they can get away with their organized criminal activity. Taking my hat off for you, Bob Bertran, tell us how that started and where you went from that.
The basic thing about the gag rules and confidentiality rules are actually breaking the will of the people, and it's criminals to do this sort of thing, because the gag rules and confidentiality were basically set up to protect lawyers and judges from speaking about any injustice in the system and speaking out openly. And even though you've been financially raped in the courts, your rights were taken away, you were abused in the courts, you had to keep your mouth shut. If you issued a complaint to the Florida bar, then automatically you're in their jurisdiction, and in your jurisdiction, you cannot talk about anything they've done to you. And of course, like anything else, in the state of Florida, like all other states, 98% of the complaints against judges and lawyers in the state of Florida every year are thrown in the waste can. You know, you wouldn't need any murder courts in this country if 98% of the murders are set free, or the drug dealers, or anything else that's going on. And the thieves, if 98% are let free, we wouldn't need any courts. It's just a waste of time. But when it pertains to lawyers, the only thing they basically do is protect themselves and hang with the people. I think that's a very big injustice, and somewhere on the line it has to be addressed, and we happened to address it way back in 1993 when we went to the federal courts. And believe it or not, at that time the ACLU went before the courts, in the federal courts, and they argued their point, and of course we won. But then we asked the ACLU to take it to the Florida, when first we went to the Florida bar, and we said, you know, you've got to honor this because the federal courts have said it so. And of course the first thing they said is, we don't take our walking orders from the federal courts, we have to go to the Florida Supreme Court. So we had to start out all over again, and believe it or not, we asked the ACLU to go before the Florida Supreme Court to make sure that our rights are protected. The ACLU came back and they said, listen, we'd all get disbarred if we went before the Florida Supreme Court because that's our bosses. So I basically told them, I said, well, as far as I'm concerned, the ACLU stands for the American Communist Lawyers Union, because they're not there to help the people, they're there to protect the interest of the lawyers. So anyway, we decided to go ourselves. We asked a lawyer that was an outspoken woman lawyer, and her name is Kathy Lerman Jackson, and we went to her and she said, it'll basically cost you $100,000 because I'm going to lose all my clients, and basically the whole thing is going to be operational. I'll be losing my clients because the whole Florida bar will be against me, and the whole judicial system will be against me, and I'll lose my case and probably lose my law practice. So she said, if you want to pay me enough, I'll do it, but again, I've got to cushion myself because against these losses. So we decided to do it ourselves. We prepared all the documents. We had it checked out by a law firm, Parker Thompson, a very prominent law firm in Dade County, and they checked it out for formalities to make sure everything was all the I's were dotted and the T's were crossed and the formalities were done properly. And we went before the Florida Supreme Court, but the basic thing, we had to have enough people to show the power of the people. So I chartered a bus. It cost me $800 out of my own pocket. And I got the Parents of Murdered Children, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, people from Martin Luther King Group, and Americans for Justice, and different people that were interested in. We went to Tallahassee and we had big signs on the side of the bus, and it said, Florida Bar, get rid of the unconstitutional gag rules and confidentials. There are too many victims. And we parked the bus right before the Florida Supreme Court, right across the street from the governor's office and right across the street from the legislature. So this bus was a large bus, and we went in there and Mr. Ron Bibace, who represents our group, basically stood before the Florida Supreme Court on behalf of the citizens of the state of Florida and said, I represent the interests of the people of the state of Florida. Mr. Steve Zach, the president of the Florida Bar, stood up right beside me and said, I represent the people in the state of Florida. Mr. Bibace showed a petition that had thousands of names on it and said, the petition basically stated that he represent the people of the state of Florida. He asked Mr. Zach, what kind of petition do you have? And of course, he had nothing. So the Supreme Court basically told him to sit down. So the basic thing is that the system can be addressed, but you have to go with petitions, you have to go with people. We had the Florida Supreme Court packed so solid that they had to put loudspeakers and chairs on the outside of the Supreme Court so all the people could at least sit down because the inside was so packed solid. And believe it or not, the Florida Supreme Court basically wanted to listen to us, but Mr. Zach wanted to speak up and say that the lawyers are fighting battles in the Florida Supreme Court for all the citizens of the state of Florida, and which he did not, because the only interest he represented were that of the interests of the lawyers in the state of Florida. He did not represent the people, and Mr. Bibace stood up and basically said, I represent the citizens, I have the petition, Mr. Zach only represents the Florida Bar itself, and this is where the problem is. This is the cancer in the system. So basically we stood there and one of the lawyers, one of the Supreme Court judges rather, basically said, we got to do everything we can to protect the rights of our lawyers in the state of Florida. They're fighting in the front line of battle in every courtroom in this state, and even some of these lawyers are doing it pro bono. Well, we all had a laugh about that because very few lawyers do things pro bono, and especially if it's not in their own interest. So anyway, Mr. Bibace stood there and he said, I represent the people, and people are having their rights destroyed in our courtrooms, and people are protesting every day. Thousands of names in our petition showing that I represent their interests, and I want to make sure these things are abolished. These gag rules and confidentials were very prominent in the Nazi regime in Nazi Germany, and this is why people were put in the gas chambers. People had all their property stolen from them, and these gag rules and confidentials were very prominent in Nazi Germany. So we did point this out.